Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. We have a lot to discuss today. First, we have that botched investigation into the missing Brown University suspect. We'll bring you the latest on the Rob Reiner homicide, also his wife, Michelle. Brian Walsh's defense crashes and burns. The sheriff says he lacked capacity when he shot the judge. A father faces sentencing for a deadly crash. We've got the man who shot the two Porch pirates. A crazy man goes driving. This day in legal history, our quote of the day, and our dumb criminal. Let's talk about it.
All right, lawyer.
Good day, everyone. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you do, leave me a comment below, hit that little bell for notifications, and remember, you can check us out on any of your favorite podcasting apps. So let's go ahead and get straight to the docket today. So let's open the record for December 15th, 2025. And first on the docket, I don't know what happened at that Brown University shooting in Providence, Rhode Island. But I was watching it all weekend. I don't know if you guys felt it as well, but it just seemed like they really didn't really know what was going on when they were giving all those press conferences, the mayor, the police chief, the governor. And then it was like, oh, we got our guy. And then by the end of the day, oops, we don't have our guy. Okay, so where is the guy? All right. So for those who aren't familiar with the case, on December 13th, a gunman entered a classroom in the Barris and Hawley building at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. Now, during a final exam review session for an economics course that was being held, the attacker opened fire, killing two students and injuring 9 others before fleeing the scene. Well, the Providence police, in coordination with the state authorities and the FBI, pursued leads and detained a person of interest early on December 14th at a hotel in Coventry, Rhode Island. Initial reports from law enforcement included statements expressing confidence in the detention, suggesting that this individual that was detained was in fact connected with the shooting. However, following some further analysis and scientific evidence and further review, the Rhode Island Attorney General, Peter Narana, announced late December 14th that the evidence now points in a different direction, leading to the individual's release without being charged. So the officials acknowledged that the development as a setback, effectively resulting in, well, nobody being arrested for the double homicides. So as of today, the shooter remains at large with no identified motive and an ongoing manhunt involving multiple agencies. Now, police have released surveillance video of a person believed to be the suspect and continue to seek public tips while emphasizing no credible ongoing threats to the community. And I'm not really sure how they can say that since, well, person that opened fire, injuring many, killing 2, is still out on the loose. And how do you know that they're not an ongoing threat? Of course they are. Anyway, the Brown University canceled the remaining classes and exams, and the incident prompted some heightened security measures in the region. No kidding. Anyway, the Brown University's campus security and emergency response protocols were activated promptly, but the mistaken detention highlights challenges, some rapidly evolving investigations involving limited initial surveillance footage from the building. Now, this is very odd to me because who doesn't have security cameras everywhere, particularly in a university building? Usually there's cameras all over, even outside, because you want to make sure that no students get, kidnapped or something on their way to class. So I find it hard to believe that they could not find any video or trace the person exiting the school area and then just basically disappearing. Now, you've seen that obviously this person was pretty well thought out in that they were in a basically all black disguise and mask and unmasking their identity. Why? Because identity is the thing that the prosecution ultimately has to prove, that they got the right person that did the crime. And here, I remember seeing early reports on X that saying, well, the guy that they arrested, somebody said that he was in his room at the time of the shooting. But apparently when the police came in, there was some cell phone evidence that brought them basically to this hotel area. And then they said, well, he had sights on his guns, and they believed that the shooter had sights on his guns. I mean, like the little laser sights on his gun. And that was enough. And then obviously they tested the guns, the firearms, and found that they apparently didn't match the spent rounds there, along with probably this guy saying, I didn't do it. Check it out. And it probably checked out. Now, like I said, the press conference, I'm not trying to badmouth the police. It was a dangerous situation. It moves quite rapidly. But it didn't, I mean, this was kind of the typical what you'd expect from a smaller kind of community. Doesn't usually get a whole lot of crime. Seems completely overwhelmed by everything. I wish them luck. Obviously, we want people brought to justice if they committed the crime, but we want to make sure we get the correct person as well. So we'll be following that as it develops. Also part of a busy weekend, Rob Reiner, the acclaimed director, actor, well, he and his wife were both killed over the weekend. And so the police have arrested their son, Nick Reiner, the 32-year-old son of Hollywood director and actor Rob Reiner, and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, on suspicion of murder following the discovery of the couple's body in their Brentwood home. Now, the LAPD confirmed that Rob Reiner, who is 78, and his wife, Michelle, who is 70, were found dead on Sunday afternoon after emergency services responded to a call at their residence in their Brentwood neighborhood around 3:40 p.m. Investigators from the LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division promptly classified the incident as a homicide, and apparently sources familiar with the case indicate that the victim sustained stab wounds. There's also reports that, well, both Mr. Reiner and his wife had their throats cut. Not good. How did they find him? Apparently a masseuse was coming over to the house, got no answer, then called Reiner's daughter, who apparently lives just across the way, and they went in the home and discovered the bodies. Needless to say, it was classified as a homicide. Anyway, so like I said, Nick Reiner, the son, was taken into custody Sunday evening and booked on murder charges. A department release further noted that the ongoing investigation identified him as responsible for the deaths. He's currently detained without bail, with the case expected to be presented to the prosecutors shortly for the filing of charges. Now, the scene outside the couple's home on Monday, there were obviously significant media attention with journalists assembling near the property. A private security presence was observed, and modest tributes, including flowers and candles, were placed at the gate. Overhead, aerial surveillance by helicopters and drones was evident as the investigation continued. Now, Rob Reiner was celebrated for directing classics such as The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, and Stand By Me, as well as his iconic role in the television series All in the Family. And obviously, he has a pretty lasting legacy in the film as well. So he and Michelle Singer Reiner, a producer who collaborated on several of his projects, had been married since 1989 and shared 3 children. Obviously, widespread condolences throughout entertainment and public life, underscoring the impact and the loss of the community. Now, the investigation remains active, with police securing a search warrant for the residence to gather further evidence, and we'll bring you the future details as they become available. Now, the son, Nick, apparently he's had issues with drugs and mental health for years, been to many, many rehabs. And I've seen some comments where the Reiners were, somewhat frustrated that, all these people with all their PhDs and everything couldn't help their son battle those demons that took place. Probably some resentment on the younger Reiner's part, because he gets sent off to all these places throughout his life. But, they had the resources. It just shows you, no matter, drugs, alcohol, it doesn't matter where you come from. It can affect anybody. And, at some point you got to ask yourself, at what point do these mental health issues become more important than the public safety? And here we have a situation where obviously 2 people are now dead. We'll see where this one's going to go. I think it's going to be kind of a crazy one. Next on the docket, Brian Walsh's defense strategy fails, crashes and burns miserably. So today, a jury in Norfolk Superior Court found Brian Walshe guilty of first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Anna Walshe, a 39-year-old real estate executive and mother of 3. Yes, mother of 3. The ages at the time of their death were between 2 through 6. The conviction follows Anna Walsh's disappearance from the couple's home on New Year's Eve back in 2023. Her remains have never been recovered. Now, the jury, composed of 6 men and 6 women, deliberated for approximately 6 hours across 2 days before delivering the verdict. Walsh displayed no visible emotion as the decision was announced and was subsequently handcuffed and taken from the courtroom. The first-degree murder charge, which requires proof of premeditation, carries a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in Massachusetts. Now, sentencing is scheduled for December 17th. We will bring it to you live, just like we brought you the entire trial. Now, prior to the trial, Walsh pled guilty to lesser charges of misleading police officers and improper conveyance of a human body. That's his admissions, where he said that he lied to the cops as to his conduct relating to, oh, that's right, chopping up his dead wife's body and disposing of her around town, where basically she's never been recovered. So those pleas of guilty could result in an additional penalty of up to 20 years for the misleading authorities and 3 years for the conveyance of a dead body charge. Anyway, prosecutors presented a case built on circumstantial evidence, arguing that Walsh killed his wife and amid some strained marriage relationships, and motivated in part by her extramarital affair with a Washington, D.C. real estate professional and potential financial gain from her approximate $2.7 million life insurance policy, for which he, coincidentally, was the beneficiary. Now, the prosecution highlighted Walsh's internet searches back on January 1st of 2023 that included, queries related to dismembering a body, disposing of remains, DNA persistence, and inheritance timeline for missing persons. Evidence also included surveillance footage showing Walsh purchasing cleaning supplies, tools such as a hacksaw, and utility knives, buckets, and protective gear from stores including Home Depot, Lowe's, and Walmart in the days following Anna's disappearance. Investigators recovered items from the family home, such as a blood-stained knife, bloody towels, gloves, and tools with traces of blood. Trash bags containing bloodied items, including some rug fragments and Anna Walsh's DNA, were retrieved from dumpsters near Walsh's mother's residence, but that was about it. Anyway, the affair witness, William Fastow, testified that he met Anna Walsh back in 2022 through a property transaction and developed an intimate relationship. Now, he stated they discussed disclosing the affair to Walsh directly. Anyway, the defense maintained that Walsh discovered his wife deceased from an unexplained natural cause and in a panic over potential suspicion, particularly given his pending federal fraud sentencing. That's right, for selling counterfeit Andy Warhol paintings. He disposed of her body and provided false statements to police. The defense called no witnesses and rested its case without Walsh testifying. Despite initial plans, the district attorney, Michael Morrissey, described the case as challenging due to the absence of a body and noted it as if the first-degree murder conviction without remains is his first in his recollection. He conveyed that Anna Walsh's sister stated justice has been served. Now, the couple's 3 young children now face life without their mother, obviously, a point emphasized by prosecutors in underscoring the tragedy's impact. I didn't think this defense was going to work at all, and I certainly would not have pled guilty to the counts relating to dismembering and lying to the police. Those are admissions that the jury is going to get to hear about. And I didn't think the defense was going to work because I didn't think Walsh would testify. And then how else are you supposed to get that evidence in that she died unexpectedly and she panicked? That's not it. Nothing came in. There's no evidence of that. So the jury had to make their decision based upon that. Now, if Walsh had testified that, in fact, he did panic and she was dead and whatever, maybe could have raised an inkling of reasonable doubt. But then he knew he was going to have to explain away everything like, well, why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you call 911? Why didn't you call a family member? Why did you lie about it? And, well, I was scared isn't really going to hack it. Hence the reason why there was probably no emotion whatsoever regarding this. You also knew right before the trial was supposed to begin about a month ago, all of a sudden they raised competency because he had been stabbed in custody. that was just the defense playing games, ladies and gentlemen. Now, yes, I'm sure they had a good faith basis, right? Sure they did. Anyway, they did what they had to do. They were buying a little more time. They came back. They pled him guilty to those counts. It was over at that point. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I always root for the defense. They're the underdogs, all right? But I tell it like it is. And I'm telling you, they never had a shot on this one. Just too many coincidences and not any evidence of an actual medical emergency whatsoever. Next, the former Kentucky sheriff admits to obviously the fatal shooting of a judge in a civil filing, but he said he didn't have the intent to kill him. In a recent development in the case of former Letcher County Sheriff Sean Mickey Steins, he's acknowledged responsibility for the shooting death of District Judge Kevin Mullins in a court filing related to a civil wrongful death lawsuit brought by the judge's wife. However, Steins maintains that he lacked the mental capacity to form the requisite intent for the act. So for those who don't recall, the incident occurred back on September 19th of 2024 inside Judge Mullins' chambers at the Letcher County Courthouse. Surveillance footage captured the event depicting Mullins attempting to seek cover during the shooting. Steins, who resigned from the position of sheriff shortly afterwards, faces criminal charges of first-degree murder of a public official and has entered a not guilty plea. Now, the admission emerged in Steins' response to a civil lawsuit initiated by Mullins' widow on behalf of the estate seeking damages for the wrongful death. In the filing, Steins concedes to carrying out the shooting, but asserts that he was unable to intentionally commit the alleged actions due to impaired mental capacity. So, counsel for Steins have also sought dismissal of certain claims, invoking principles of sovereign immunity and arguing that negligence allegations require proof of intent. This position aligns with the prior indication that Steins' defense strategy may incorporate elements of mental health impairment, including potential extreme emotional disturbance or psychosis. Now, reports suggest that the establishing such conditions could influence sentencing considerations in the criminal proceedings under Kentucky law, potentially mitigating eligibility of the capital punishment. Now, a judicial ruling has recently upheld that the criminal indictment against Steins, rejecting motions to dismiss based upon alleged procedural irregularities in the grand jury process. And obviously, so this case is going to, we're going to look at mental health issues, legal accountability within the justice system as this develops. Stein remains in custody as both the criminal and civil proceedings advances. Once again, this is a tough case, and I'm not really sure how you're going to get NGRI after the shooting here when Mickey Steins, the sheriff, basically goes outside and says, yeah, I just did this, and, be nice to me, so to speak. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but it was basically be gentle. I'm the sheriff. I'm not going to harm anybody else. I've done that. There's no evidence of drugs. There's no evidence of alcohol. No prior mental health issues whatsoever. And for them to say that, well, he was deposed and found out he thought the judge was involved in some sort of nefarious conduct in the courthouse relating to sex with inmates. I just don't see how that is going to rise to even a heat of passion type defense. When you see the video and the judge is, putting his hands up and cowering and then being shot repeatedly by the sheriff, it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one for the defense. Just being honest, ladies and gentlemen. Next, sentencing is delayed for a Florida father conviction in connection with a deadly 23 crash involving an unlicensed teenage son. So the sentencing hearing for Richard Seymour Ferguson, a 69-year-old man convicted of 4 counts of manslaughter related to a tragic 2023 car crash that claimed 4 lives, has been postponed. Now, Ferguson was found guilty back in October of this year for the involvement in the incident which occurred on September 3rd of 2023 down in Florida. Police determined that Ferguson's then 15-year-old son, who lacked a driver's license, was operating a 2012 Chevy Impala at speeds of between 76 and 87 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. The vehicle disregarded a stop sign at the intersection, resulting in a collision with a 2022 Honda HR-V driven by a 50-year-old man by the name of Trinidad Hernandez. Hernandez and her 3 grandchildren an 11-year-old girl pronounced dead at the scene, a 9-year-old boy, and a 1-year-old girl who succumbed to injuries at the hospital perished in the crash. A surviving passenger identified as Angel Hernandez sustained serious injuries and was hospitalized. Now, the Impala carried 4 15-year-old boys, including Ferguson's son, as the driver. Now, investigators indicate that the teenager had gathered at Ferguson's residence earlier in the evening. One of the boys expressed a need to retrieve a belt from elsewhere, prompting Ferguson to allegedly relocate a pickup truck from the driveway to facilitate access to the Impala. Witnesses stated that Ferguson permitted his son to drive the group despite knowing the teenager was unlicensed. Additional accounts from the scene include a witness reporting that the young driver expressed concern about parental repercussions and potential legal consequences. Upon the parents' arrival, instructions were reportedly given for the teenagers to remain silent to avoid speaking with law enforcement. Ferguson's son later entered a plea agreement admitting responsibility and remaining in juvenile custody. Ferguson faces a potential sentence of up to 37 years to life imprisonment. A new date for his sentencing has not yet been established following the recent continuance. Now, the case obviously brings to the issue of parental responsibility. And as you know, we've talked about, for example, the Michigan shooter cases where the parents gave the kid a gun, but they didn't know he was going to go out and shoot up the school. I said, if the parents had said, today's the big day, son, we're going to go shoot it up, then they should be held responsible. But when they didn't know that he was going to do it, I don't think they should. It's a slippery slope. Now, here, did the dad know that they were going to get in an accident and blow through the stop sign? No, but this is much different in this particular case than compared to the Michigan shooting family case, because he knew his son was unlicensed and basically said, go son, take the car with your friends. Big difference. This is much different, than saying, one day, son, this Impala is going to be yours and you'll be able to drive it when you have a license. And, but we may even drive it under the supervision where nobody can get hurt. But when you let him drive it with friends in it, it's all off. Now, obviously, the defense attorneys for the parents are going to say that he should not be held criminally responsible for the actions of his son, that it should be a civil matter. And I would make the argument if I was their attorney, but I think it's going to be a little tougher to sell on this one. Next, Porch pirates, beware everywhere. People shoot at Porch Pirates these days. So police in Atlanta have disclosed audio recordings of the emergency call made shortly after a resident allegedly fired upon 2 teenagers suspected of attempting to remove packages from his front porch. Now, this incident occurred on Thursday afternoon in the southwest Atlanta neighborhood along Celeste Lane. The 2 injured individuals, both male, aged 15 and 16, sustained gunshot wounds and were transported to a medical facility, obviously. And the medical officials indicate that they are both anticipated to recover fully. In one of the released 911 recordings, a witness described hearing gunfire followed by the sight of 2 young males fleeing the scene. One of the youths approached the caller, stating that he had been shot before departing the area. The caller reported providing a shirt to one of the injured teenagers and advising him to apply pressure to the wound on his arm. The witness emphasized uncertainty about the preceding events, but confirmed hearing multiple gunshots. A separate emergency call captured a resident who was awakened by cries of assistance outside her home. She directed her son to investigate and learned that an individual was bleeding. The victim subsequently moved toward a neighboring apartment complex, and in the recording, a male voice can be heard reassuring the caller that the injured person appeared stable despite bleeding. Now, the dispatcher provided guidance, instructing the use of clean cloth or towel to apply firm pressure to the wound while waiting the arrival of emergency responders, noting that several units were en route. Now, the Atlanta police apprehended 34-year-old Rakeem Bradford on the day of the shooting. He faces 2 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Now, according to the Atlanta police chief, evidence suggests that Bradford discharged his weapon upon observing individuals removing packages from the porch of his residence. The chief underscored the department's commitment to incidents involving minors, stating that such cases are treated with the utmost seriousness. He emphasized the importance of establishing a clear account of events, ensuring accountability, and providing necessary support to the affected families. Blah, 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 blah. Right? Anyway, the investigation continues, and the police will gather additional details surrounding the circumstances of the shooting. But here's what it amounts to, ladies and gentlemen. If this gentleman shot the alleged porch pirates, the miners, the Utes of America out there trying to take other people's stuff from the porch, you can't shoot people, ladies and gentlemen. You can't shoot people for stealing your property like that. Don't get me wrong. I think it would stop a lot of porch pirates if you could actually shoot porch pirates. But you can't. And in most states, they got to break the threshold, the plane of the door. If the items were inside, all right, and you knew that the teenagers had crossed the plane of the door, in some jurisdictions, in most jurisdictions, it's going to be a close call, but they got to cross that threshold. And then you can say you were in fear of death or serious bodily injury. But if it's outside and it's just stuff that can be replaced, I know it's an inconvenience. It sucks. We've all had things stolen. It sucks. But guess what? You can't shoot people over stuff. There's your free legal advice for the day, ladies and gentlemen. Don't shoot people over stuff. It's a lot more complicated. Wait till they come inside. And no, you can't shoot them first and then drag them inside. You can't do that either. All right? Just a little bit of free legal advice there. Best advice, don't shoot anybody. And, I'm a big Second Amendment guy. But as I tell everybody, guns complicate everything when it comes to criminal defense. All right? It's stuff. Next, a crazy man goes driving. Police in Robeson County, North Carolina, have arrested a 36-year-old man with a prior murder conviction following a series of violent events that culminated in the death of a 74-year-old woman. Cheyenne D. Woods of Red Springs faces multiple felony charges, including first-degree murder after allegedly brandishing a firearm at emergency medical personnel, seizing control of an ambulance, colliding with another car, and shooting the driver. Now, this all unfolded on Saturday, December 13th, when Robeson County Emergency Medical Services responded to a medical call on a Chavis Road in the Maxton area. Now, while transporting Woods to a hospital, he reportedly threatened two EMS workers with a gun, assaulted them, and took command of the vehicle. Shortly thereafter, Woods crashed the ambulance into a car driven by a 74-year-old woman by the name of Marie Locklear, also of Red Springs. Now, according to the Robeson County Sheriff's Office, Woods then exited the ambulance, approached Locklear's vehicle, and fired shots, striking her. Locklear was transported to the hospital but succumbed to her injuries. Woods was apprehended near the scene. He's currently being held without bond at the Robeson County Detention Center. Initial charges include first-degree murder, robbery with a dangerous weapon, possession of a firearm by a felon, possession of a stolen firearm, assault on emergency personnel, and multiple counts of discharging a weapon into occupied property. Additional charges will be filed soon. You can't make this stuff up, ladies and gentlemen. You simply can't make this stuff up. Now, apparently, Woods has a documented criminal history, including a 2017 conviction for second-degree murder, stemming from a 2010 shooting for which he served approximately 5 years, being released back in 2022. The investigation remains ongoing with the assistance from federal authorities. Next on the docket, this day in legal history. On this date, December 15th, 1791, ratification of the Bill of Rights. That's right. The state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, became the crucial state to ratify the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, bringing them into effect. The Bill of Rights, obviously, amendments enshrine core liberties such as free speech, free exercise of religion, the right to bear arms, protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, and the right of criminal defendants. On this date, 1856, the United States Supreme Court began a 4-day re-argument in the Dred Scott v. Sanford decision, where an enslaved man filed suit for freedom that would ultimately culminate in the infamous 1857 decision denying citizenship to African Americans and striking down the Missouri Compromise. That's right, Dred Scott decision. Horrible. And next, this date in 1952, The United States Supreme Court struck down Oklahoma's blanket loyalty oath to state employees, holding that automatically disqualifying anyone who had belonged to certain organizations without regard to knowledge or intent violated due process, and it was an important limit on guilt by association in public employment. Now, remember the date on that. We're talking the 50s, right? What was it? The Cold Scare. You couldn't, heck, I remember even into the military, into the late 80s, early 90s, you couldn't be a member of the Communist Party. Otherwise, they would disqualify you for any type of public service. They certainly weren't going to get a security clearance, right? But, way back in the 50s, they said, nope, you can't discriminate on somebody because of their association. Unless, of course, it involves national security. Next, our quote of the day. A prominent and influential illegal quote regarding cruel and unusual punishment comes today from the case of Trop v. Dulles, 1958 as well, where Justin Earl Warren, in a plurality opinion, which means 5-4, said the following, quote, "The amendment must draw its meaning from the evolving standard of decency that marked the progress of a maturing society. The statement establishes a foundational principle for interpretation of the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. It emphasized that the clause is not static, but adapts to contemporary societal values, reflecting a progressive understanding of human dignity and civilized treatment." Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, this was during a different time. That's when a lot of the people in the United States Supreme Court thought that the Constitution was a living document and we must amend it to our times and the defining, beliefs of society at the time. These ever-evolving standards. And obviously now the court has shifted where it's like, no, this is what it says. You got to interpret it at the time that the Constitution was signed, the meaning and words of effect at that time. It's not a living document. It's dead. It's a dead document in the sense that you don't get to change the interpretation just because you don't like when it was written. And finally, our dumb criminal of the day. In what can only be described as an epic failure in criminal calendar management, a 24-year-old Milwaukee woman allegedly attempted to reprise her role as a retail raider at a local Walmart, only to discover the store had temporarily rebranded itself as a de facto police headquarters. Please meet Sophia Malik, fresh off an alleged theft to more than $600 in merchandise just days earlier from the same Hartford location, reportedly wheeled in a shopping cart on December 6th, intent on another five-finger discount. Unbeknownst to her, the aisles were teeming with approximately 15 uniformed officers participating in the annual Shop with a Cop charity event, where law enforcement partners with children from local families to select holiday gifts. Officers already on site and vigilant among the festive atmosphere quickly recognized Malik from the prior incident. They intercepted her promptly, finding over $250 worth of items in her cart, and upon searching her car, discovered an additional $900 in purportedly pilfered toys. The Hartford Police Department, displaying a flair for dry humor in their social media recounting of the events, noted that Malik had wandered into the store during the one time of year when it's basically a satellite police station. They further advising aspiring offenders, if you're planning felony retail theft, maybe avoid the day when the building is basically 30% law enforcement and 70% wrapping paper. Malik reportedly informed police that she intended the items as gifts for her children and admitted to prior shoplifting at multiple Walmart stores in the area. She faces a felony retail theft charge along with misdemeanor bail jumping counts and been released on a personal recognizance bond pending her next court appearance. Now, while the unexpected arrest added an ironic twist to the proceedings, the charity event proceeded without significant disruption, delivering holiday cheer to participating children and an unforgettable lesson in timing to one would-be Grinch. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next time. And remember, the Constitution matters.